Everybody, welcome. There we go. We've got the mic on now. How are y'all doing? My name is Bonnie Brzozowski. If you don't know me yet, I'm a public services librarian at the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library, and I'm here to welcome you to today's random review. I want to start with just a few little announcements. I always like to start by taking a moment to thank all of the folks that help make Random Review possible. So first of all, I want to thank the Random Review Committee. That's a committee of 9 folks who come together once a year to select books and reviewers for this 10-month series. A special thanks to Gary Whitehouse for writing our fabulous press releases. A special thanks to Gail Gerdeman for creating a curated list of books, some of which you can check out there on the back of the table. I also want to thank our friends and Foundation of the Library. They co-sponsor and support Random Review. If you haven't heard by now, they not only founded and ran this series for 30 years, they also coordinate and run book sales whose funds benefit the library, and they support the library in so many other ways. You can learn more about how to join or volunteer at cbclfriendsandfoundation.org. If you're not familiar, I want to make sure you know about our Random Review webpage. That's cbcpl.net/random-review. On that page, you can find the full schedule of Random Review events, a list of books related to each book that I mentioned compiled by Gail, and links to audio recordings for each in-person event. The audio recordings will be posted with transcripts on the library's YouTube channel and linked to from the Random Review page. We also live stream all of these random reviews, so hello, live audience that is joining us. You can watch these live from home. You can find the live stream link, which is the same each month, on the Random Review webpage. So thanks for hanging in there with me through the announcements. I want to get a bit of a closer look at today's main event. So as you probably know, we have invited Laurie Bridges to review Code Dependent, Living in the Shadow of AI by Madhumita Murgia. I'm actually the Random Review Committee member that nominated this particular book. As a librarian, a big part of my job is to understand and help people navigate our information landscape. Over the years, as a librarian, I've been a librarian for 17 years. That landscape has changed quite dramatically with the rise of the internet and phone usage. Information has never been as easy to access as it is today. The power and promise of AI stands to change our information landscape even more dramatically, and I spend a lot of time contemplating how it might impact not only my profession, but society as a whole. So in true librarian fashion, I've been reading everything I can on the topic in an effort to fully grasp our present as well as consider the future. Code Dependent is one of the better books, or one of the better books I had read at the time about AI, and I think one of the main reasons for that is that it centers people. Murgia's book consists of case studies that help us understand the impact this technology is already having, while also providing an introduction to how the technology works that's pretty accessible for everyday people. I'm really excited the committee voted for this book, and that we'll get a chance to take a closer look at it today. I'm also the one who nominated Laurie for the review. Laurie and I have known each other for quite a while. She's been a librarian at OSU for some number of years, a lot of years, because we've known each other quite a number of years. We've had a lot of opportunities to work together over the years. But the only reason I actually know of Laurie's work with AI is thanks to LinkedIn. We're connected on LinkedIn, and when I would periodically pop my head on there, I'd find that she was always posting about how AI was being used for learning, research, its societal impacts, etc. So when I nominated the book, I really knew that the best person for this review would not be someone who worked in the AI field, but someone who worked in a field that is seeing the societal impact of AI. I am biased, but I think librarians are especially well equipped for understanding how AI may transform our lives because they understand well the ways in which we access information, and that the way we access information already deeply shapes our lives. Not long after Laurie agreed to do this review, I heard the announcement about the development of the AI Literacy Center at OSU, where she is the director. So how perfect is that? And then I just had one other note on here. We've hung out just a handful of times outside of work functions, and Laurie has one of the best all-time laughs, in my opinion. But I'll give you the formal biography and credentials for Laurie. Laurie is a humanities librarian, and she's the director of the AI Literacy Center at Oregon State University. Her teaching and research are focused on advancing critical AI literacy. She aims to help people thoughtfully engage with Gen AI, recognizing both its potential and risks. Laurie teaches a one-credit OSU Honors College Colloquium, Generative AI and Society, which explores the societal implications of emerging AI technologies. In and outside of the classroom, Laurie facilitates conversations about the ethical considerations of Gen AI, including topics such as bias in training data, privacy concerns, the generation of misinformation, for example, hallucinations, and the need for responsible AI policy and regulation. So let's welcome Laurie to Random Review.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. And I'll start with a quick question, which is, how many of you have read the book? Okay, I kind of like that. Then I can't, if I say things that are not quite accurate, clearly you're not going to know. So that's a good for me. I want to thank Bonnie for inviting me and for inviting me to speak today. And I want to say that I've read a lot of books about AI over the past 2 years. I listen to a lot of them on audio. I prefer to listen to nonfiction on audio. So if I've listened on audio and it was good on audio, I'll also mention that. But today what I'm going to do is talk about Code Dependent by also mentioning other books on similar topics when I've read them. Because although I liked Code Dependent, I did find the information to be very overwhelming. This book has a lot of information in every chapter. And then I always prefer a structure of kind of personal stories. And this does have that at the beginning of some of the chapters, but I prefer more of an arc. So when I read books that I really like, it usually centers one or two people and then it follows them. So what I'm going to do is start with a little introduction of myself, then review the individual chapters because the author of this book is a journalist, and I think that kind of informs how she wrote the book. So I really believe every chapter could be a standalone chapter. And because I was reading it, we decided to use the book for an event at the OSU libraries called the AI Coffee Clatch. And the Coffee Clatch meets once a quarter, and it's open to OSU faculty and instructors. And we choose one chapter from a book, and we discuss that one chapter. But we hope people read the whole book, but we do read the one chapter. And so we did read one chapter from this book and discuss it a couple of weeks ago. And they really do stand very well on their own. So I would call them almost a long read by a journalist, each chapter. So I always like to learn a little bit more about the people that are speaking when I'm listening to them. So I thought I would tell a little bit more about how I became a librarian and how that dovetails with AI. And so this is a picture of myself, I'm the little blonde one, and my parents. And I think this was around 1983 or 84. My mom is getting her bachelor's degree. My father had gotten his bachelor's degree about 3 years before, and they were both computer programmers. So my mom got a computer science degree in 1983. My dad didn't get a computer science degree until later because we were a military family. And if anyone here is in the military, then you know to move from an enlisted to an officer, you just have to get a degree. So my dad just got a degree when I was in first or second grade, and then he was put into computer programming. So both my parents were computer programmers. They talked about computers at the dinner table. I thought it was the most boring thing ever. So we talked about, if you know anything about older computer languages, they talked about Perl and Cobalt at the dinner table. And in middle school, I did take my first computer class, so that would have been about 8th grade. And I liked working with computers and I thought they were interesting, but I knew I did not want to have the types of dinner conversations my parents had. And so I was like, no, I will never do that. And then the other thing my parents have in common is we're a huge reading family. So in addition to computers, we read a lot of books. So I became an English major and that's what I loved. So my whole life has been books and computers. Now, a little bit about this author. She really writes from a British perspective, I'd say. And so a lot of the stories in the book are centered in the UK or British colonies. And she grew up in Mumbai, but now lives in the UK. And she studied biology at the University of Oxford. She has an MA in science journalism. And so I do think that, as I said, informs the way she writes the book. So at the introduction of the book, which is rather long, it could have been its own chapter, she says that each of the lives you will encounter charts the unintended consequences of AI on an individual's self-worth, on families, communities, and our wider cultures. Through their experiences, I hope to answer the question I started with. How is artificial intelligence changing what it means to be human? So I would say this is the thesis statement of the book and then ties all of the different chapters together. So what I've done here is you can't see them all the way back there, but I put news headlines that relate to the book chapter. And that's something I do when I talk with students to bring it to reality, what's happening or what's going on. What do current or recent headlines say about that particular topic? So this book really is about societal implications, and I would say specifically concerns about AI. And so she goes and talks to various people that are experiencing these things. So the chapter 1 is called Livelihood, and this is the chapter where she gets into the topic of data labeling. So data labeling is not unique to AI because it's been done ever since there were images on the internet, basically. But it's definitely, from what I've read, ramped up recently. So data labeling is a contract job, usually. Most of data labelers are in the global south, though there are data labelers in the United States. And there is a system in the US specifically hosted by Amazon, and they're called, I believe they're called Turks, but they take contract work and then they just label data. That would be the whole job. So you're not getting paid hourly, you're getting paid contracts. Some of these jobs are just like 10 cents, 20 cents. They could be a couple of dollars. People go online, they can work from home, so it is very flexible, and then they choose these separate small jobs. So it could be something simple like, I am going to label, as it says in the book, I am going to label phosphorus in test tubes for researchers. So that would be the whole job. They're just looking at photos, gauging how much phosphorus or whatever is in a test tube. And then in that way, they're training a machine. They're training it to recognize different images. So it could be something as simple as that. It could be, for example, the book says, tagging a video of 1 hour of driving takes 8 hours. So when you see Waymo cars or cars that are self-driving, they are driven by data, basically, and that data was labeled in many instances by humans. These humans just sit in front of a computer all day labeling and squaring. That's a sign, that's a tree, that's the dash in the road, that's a human. So if, like me, you might have some type of self-driving element in your car, like mine has the adaptive cruise control. As an example, as my son and I were driving to California, and I was going at interstate speeds, and then suddenly the car just slammed on its brakes, and so we lurched, and then it started up again, and we were contemplating what it had seen or misinterpreted. We thought maybe a garbage bag on the side of the road, but we didn't know. But those are all, that's why you need to keep your hands on the wheel, because it's all data and how was it labeled and decided. So she talks about those, but then there are more, I guess I would call them horrors of data labeling. These people sign non-disclosure agreements. In many countries, they go to buildings that are closed windowed, and they are labeling pornography and abuses online so that the computer can recognize those things online. And so there is a group called the Data Labelers Association, and they're international, and they're trying to advocate for rights for these people. So imagine you do these things and the trauma that it causes, and you've signed a non-disclosure agreement, so the need for counseling is very, very high, and that's one of the goals of these unions and associations. In addition to a living wage, or let's say you're a gig worker in this way, if something goes wrong, like it's described in chapters in this book, if something goes wrong and you're flagged for not doing the job right, you're not necessarily told why you were flagged, just that you were flagged. And then if you get 3 flags, you lose your job without being able to talk to a human about your job loss. So there are lots of problems within this ecosystem. So this is one of the absolute best books I've read about AI, and it's called How to Stop Silicon Valley from Building a New Global Underclass, Ghost Work. And it's one author, and she really dives deep and researches different communities. So an example is one community she visits, and it's a community in India, and the whole town has built an infrastructure around being data labelers, and how they structure that community, how they have permissions, and how they get paid. It's quite fascinating. But what I really love about the book is the deep research and then the recommendations at the end. So it doesn't just point out there are these problems. Instead, she goes and works and studies businesses that are doing better and supporting their employees. So the next chapter in the book is called Your Body. And this chapter is about deepfakes, and then also somewhat about facial recognition software. So if you know anything about deepfakes, they can be benign, they can be simple. A deepfake is just simply called that because of the word deep learning, which is what AI does. It does deep machine learning. And so deepfakes are a real concern I have found with the undergraduate students that have taken my class. The first time I taught my class, I've taught it 3 times now. The first time I taught it, I had one open class, and I said, okay, we'll look at whatever you want related to AI. And what the students wanted to talk about was deepfakes, which is the thing I knew the least about, so I had to do a lot of reading about deepfakes. And I think they're concerned because of high school deepfakes. If you've read the news at all, kids can make deepfakes of their classmates nude using just a picture of their head. So there are deepfakes in schools, and different countries are going about creating laws in different ways. I will say that I don't think the United States is doing enough, and that's why states are doing individual laws right now. And I think California and Illinois are really leading when it comes to laws. But we do have one federal law. It's called the Take It Down Act. And it is for people to be able to remove any type of non-consensual pornography of them online or deepfake pornography. But I want to stress that what do people do with that law? Well, you have to yourself go to the platforms and ask them to have it removed. Do you go to the police? Like, these things are still questionable. And then also what happens to the person that created these deep fakes? And right now there's really nothing. So some countries are passing criminal law, like Italy passed a law where you get a certain number of years in jail if you're found guilty of creating non-consensual pornographic deepfakes. California is trying to create laws about this. One was struck down, I think, this summer. And then Denmark is doing something very strange. I don't know how this will work, but they have just given people copyright over their own faces. So I am in no way a lawyer, and I try to avoid conversations about copyright because they're just incredibly complicated. But these are some of the things that are happening. Now, when we talk about ChatGPT, that is what is known as generative AI. And it is generating new information or novel information based on all the information it has, and it's basically statistical probability. But deepfakes and facial recognition are different types of AI. So when you get your face recognized, it's called discriminative AI, and it's basically comparing your face to other faces in its database. That's one way that it's done. And this is getting more and more prevalent in different areas. If you've heard anything about China, they have social scoring systems in China that are based on your face. And those algorithms determine different elements of your life. So that's becoming more and more prevalent. My personal current concern is the Ring Amazon. So if you have Ring, starting this month, Ring is unveiling facial recognition in the Ring. So your Ring will now be uploading and storing faces, which there is only a few places where this is currently illegal in the US. One is Portland. So Portland has laws that make it illegal to do facial surveillance in public places. So Portland will not, Amazon will not unveil the Ring facial recognition in Portland, but it will be in the rest of Oregon. Yeah.
What is Ring?
So Ring is when people have Amazon in their doorbell, and it's a camera that lets you see who's coming to the door.
On your phone you can see?
Yeah, on your phone you can see, or on your TV.
So what's illegal is you can't see it on your phone?
What's illegal is facial recognition. So right now, when someone goes to Ring, they go to your door. You can see it on your phone and you're like, oh, I know who that is or not. But now there will be the additional added element of scanning your face and comparing it to other faces
And storing it,
and storing it. Hmm.
and labeling your name?
Yes, your name. So my concern about this is that people come to your door, they're going to be, to whoever has a ring, you're going to be facially scanned whether you want to be or not. And then it's going to be uploaded, and you have to think about this, they're all technically tied together, and Amazon has access to that data. So they also have a thing called, I think it's called Friendly Pets. I can't remember, but there's also the ability in these to identify your pet if your pet runs away. So I don't know, it's going to be analyzing your pets somehow, but that's part of it as well.
What's your name?
Your
Ring know your name.
Well, sadly, there's probably an image of your face somewhere in a database. So for myself, I have been on airplanes, and if you've ever had your face scanned on an airplane, that's now part of the databases. And they're sharing it back and forth, the Amazon and the government. Yeah.
Yeah, several years ago, I was at a AAAS meeting talking about forensics.
Mm-hmm.
I met a police officer from the Midwest there who showed me an app on his phone. He could take a picture of anyone, and it would scan a database of more than 3 billion people and give a name to that face. And he showed me several pictures where everybody was tagged.
Mm-hmm.
And then he aimed the phone at me and took my picture, and it could not recognize me. And the reason it couldn't recognize me is I do not put selfies on the web.
Oh, that's good.
So if you,
Although you let your friend upload you, now they will know you.
There now.
I do want to point that out.
as long as you're not tagged, they can't find you. I did a search on my name for images, and most of the images that came up were actually photographs of singers and performers, because I took a lot of photographs for folk and blues groups and got photo credit.
Yeah.
So those pictures that were not of me were not with my name, so that's threw it off.
Yeah, these tools, they do use internet data, but they're also using those scans that have been taken at the airport. And real quickly, what I'll say is there are 2 books that I recommend on this topic if you want to learn more. The first one is Unmasking AI. It's a little bit outdated. It was written about 2 years ago, so that's how quickly things are moving. But it's called Unmasking AI. If any of you went to MIT or are interested in what happens at MIT, I was so fascinated reading this book because it's really a deep dive into what it's like to be a grad student at MIT, which is wildly different than my experience as a grad student. But in this book, the reason Joy Buolamwini is the author, and she's a Black woman, and she was doing a project at MIT to have a mirror, basically, she was kind of creating a little thing where a mirror would talk to her. And so it needed to use facial recognition. And then she realized that none of the available tools would recognize her face because it was Black. And therefore, she had a white mask because she's into theater, and she put it on her face, and then it would recognize her face. So to complete her project for class, she had to put a mask on her face every time she was testing. And so this is the intro into why these tools are not 100% accurate. And there are news stories of people being arrested because it's incorrect. And you would say, oh, yes, but there's a human in the loop. People need to check. But I just want you to imagine, for example, when people have a bias that this person is the person, then they don't really go and check. And then the other book I would recommend is Your Face Belongs to Us. And this book is a deep dive into something called Clearview, which is the one used by police. So police have been also gathering, and it's only available to them. So Clearview has the largest database of faces in the world. Clearview uses them with the police and with ICE and connecting with the government. So hold on a sec. We have one question over here.
Yeah, so when, at the airport, they scan your face, and I assume, and they have your ID, driver's license in front of them, and I assume they're letting AI determine if you are the person on that photo.
Correct.
And they specifically say, this is destroyed as soon as it achieves that purpose. They do not send it. They're saying they do not. Yeah. It's not going anywhere else. Is that
Right.
true?
I have no way of proving it one way or the other.
Do what?
I have no way to prove that that's what happens.
Oh, okay, I thought you just said that they link up all the airport.
There's lots of data that's being shared between the government and Amazon. What specifically is hard to say simply because it's called a black box. And this black box is how AI algorithms determine things and what information is in there. And all the companies are saying, we can't tell you what's in there because it's proprietary. So it's,
Well, this just is a public action that can be taken. If they're making a statement that photo is destroyed, it just exists temporarily, and that's not true, that needs to be brought up.
yeah, people are pointing that out, but then what?
Well, you can refuse to have your photo taken,
Yes, you can do that. You can refuse to have your photo taken.
you know? I would like to have a rationale
So,
for that.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yep,
Do they have driver's license photos?
yes. From what I understand, they have it all. So there's a lot of photos that they have access to. And when I first started exploring ChatGPT, one of the questions I had that I added to an article I was writing at the time was how are folks getting data? And where is the data coming from? So it's coming from many, many places. But what is interesting is as I was writing this article, I went to OpenAI, who runs ChatGPT. I went to their website I was checking something out, and it was a call from OpenAI in their jobs listings. But it was a call for anyone that had any non-open data to please contact them, and they would buy it. And then the ad actually said, and I've saved it, so I have it. The ad actually said, if there's private information, don't worry, we can help you remove it. So it was a lot of questions on that one. So going back real quickly, there's a chapter in this book called Your Identity, Chapter 3. It also talks about these things. One thing that's getting a lot of backlash in the UK are these things called facial recognition vans. There's a documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias, which is also by Joy Buolamwini, who wrote the Unmasking AI book. But in Coded Bias, there is a moment in the documentary where they follow these people who are protesting against the facial recognition vans. So basically what happens is the van just parks wherever it wants to park, and it has a camera on top of it and police around it, and then they just scan everyone's faces in the area. And then if they see someone who maybe they think is troubling, they just approach them and ask them what they're doing and who they are. And so they actually capture them kind of harassing a young teenager from these facial recognition vans. So if you just Googled that right now, you'd see news stories about these facial recognition vans in the UK. And South Africa currently has the most surveillance in the world, from what I've read, outside of China. And so there's some about that in the book as well as in Unmasking AI. So for me personally, a big issue is surveillance. I'm very concerned about surveillance and who has access to our faces and what that means for us in the future. So in my class where we discuss the Ring videos, for example, we discussed who does this type of surveillance make feel safer and who does it make feel less safe. And so we talked about marginalized communities and communities of color. And China is currently the country with the most surveillance, and I have a little bit about that later. One place where I have hope for AI is in the medical field. And so a lot of discussion about using AI to identify X-ray abnormalities or test results. But at the flip side, there are other issues with racial bias in algorithms, because these algorithms and AI is trained on past data. So if there is racist decisions in past data, that can get passed forward. So here's a study by Cedars-Sinai this summer saying that AI-generated treatment for psychiatric patients showed racial bias. A strange example, and Bonnie mentioned LinkedIn a little bit ago, but there's kind of a social media furor happening on LinkedIn, and that is a woman a couple weeks ago noticed that if she changed her gender to man, she's a businesswoman, that suddenly her views went way, way up, and then other women started doing the same thing, and their views went way, way up, and so clearly the algorithm prefers men and puts their posts forward first. So some women uncovered this.
Just like
Then the second one is Your Freedom. And so this chapter talks about predictive AI. I don't know a lot about predictive AI, but what I do know is it's predicting things that haven't happened yet. And I think the most interesting, kind of relatable one that happened within the past few years actually happened in the UK. And here is a protest. It's in the UK, I think, known as the Fuck the Algorithm moment. And during COVID, I don't know much about the UK. All I know for high school, is anyone here from the UK? That you go from high school to college, you have to take a major test, and that decides your life, from what I understand. So during COVID, people could not take this test. So the schools had teachers score students, like, what score do you think this student would get based on past things? So the teachers scored everyone. And then they brought in an AI algorithm to score the students based on, past scores that you had in addition to past scores of your school, blah, blah, blah. And this score was going to determine whether you got into college and which one you got into. And so the reason the movement happened from students was they said no, because obviously, and what the data showed was that the students in the poor neighborhoods were scored lower. The students who went to the private rich schools scored higher. And so the students were furious. So the determination in the end, and there was a law firm that was involved, the determination in the end was they would use the higher of the two scores. So whether it was the teacher score or the algorithm score, which one was higher, and that's the one you could use to get into college. I'm not a fan of either way, but it's still an interesting look at what predictive AI is and how it works. So predictive policing is being used in some communities, and one of those is the Netherlands. And so there are quite a few news stories out there about this activity in the Netherlands, and they talk about it in the book, where teens aged 12 to 18 were identified as being potential criminals. And they were put on a list of 600 and 400. And then they were forced to have social services come to their home and work with their family. So the mother that's interviewed throughout this chapter is saying, what does this do to your kid's self-esteem to be pre-identified as a criminal? So what were the things that went into one of the kids being identified? Well, his brother had committed some crimes. And so that was one of the key points, or the neighborhood you live in. And of course, kids of color were more likely to be on that list. So it wasn't that they had done anything yet, just that they were probably going to, according to the algorithm. Wow. So as far as I know, they're not doing this anymore because there was so much outrage, but I'm sure it did traumatize some families. Once the police came to my house because my kid was playing his drum for 5 minutes, that was enough for me. So I don't even know how you would deal with people coming when nothing's even happened. All right, so this one is about your safety, and this was it really should have been also in the predictive analytics, but this was about a study that was done in Argentina, and the study was on predicting young girls who were going to become pregnant in a certain neighborhood. And what it brings up is obviously the consequences of rape. So that was also in the algorithm. It wasn't necessarily consensual teen pregnancy, just predicting you might become pregnant. And then it identified 200 families, and it was a relationship between Microsoft and the government. And so Microsoft was gathering all this data, the government was gathering all this data. Some professors at Buenos Aires University pushed back and found flaws in the algorithm. And so eventually it was abandoned when the government switched to a different government. And so part of the chapter is her investigating what happened to all that data and why did they do this? So it's kind of an inconclusive chapter. She basically says the only people that benefited were Microsoft by getting all this data. If the topic of data interests you, then I suggest reading this book called How Data Happened. This is a book that I never in a million years would have read on my own, but we have this coffee klatch in the library, and because we were reading it, other people read it who said they probably would never have read it, but it is a really well-written and fascinating book about why we collect data and how data has become so important today and in what ways data is used today. Then there's another chapter about AI as your boss. So I've read quite a bit about this, but this chapter is specifically about Uber Eats. So there's the Uber car driving, but there's also Uber Eats in bigger cities where they deliver your food. And it just so happens there was a computer scientist who wanted to take a little break doing Uber Eats. And then he became so angry at the algorithms because he couldn't figure out how it was figuring out how he would get paid or the times, and he couldn't talk to any humans. So he made up a cheat that people could download as an app, and then it would rectify what the company was telling you should be paid versus what you were actually being paid. So there are a lot of fights going on right now in unions for these folks to figure out how they're getting paid. So you, like, for example, I think it's so odd, like in Amsterdam, the court gives people a right for a human review of algorithms. So that's something people are fighting for in these jobs. Like, I want to know what the algorithm is and how it makes decisions. So Amsterdam has said people have the right to look at the algorithms, which to me seems pretty basic, but these are some of the fights being fought right now. The second one is about human rights. And as I said, I would personally like it if we had more regulation in the US. So I clipped some news stories. For example, right now there is from the ACLU. They're working to pass in Congress a bill about civil rights and AI. And then here in Corvallis, which I suggest you invite her to speak sometime, we have Kiri Wagstaff. She's our special advisor on AI at the library. She's a computer scientist who worked for NASA for 20 years, and part of that time was on machine learning, which is often what AI is called, on Mars robots. And so she did that work, and then 2 years ago, she was Mark Kelly, the senator's advisor on AI in DC. So she's worked on bills in Congress trying to get them passed, but she'll also tell you that there's just not enough regulation and how difficult it is to get a bill passed. And then Forbes recently, just a couple months ago, had an article called Why AI is a Human Rights Issue. And that's a pretty lengthy article as well. So these algorithms are becoming more and more a part of our life. So it's ultimately, I would say, an issue with algorithms. And so regulations on algorithms. And in knowing your rights is, as I said, when you get your photo taken at the border. There's an article that I clipped that's on another page that is about Kristi Noem negotiated with Belize that they will share their facial recognition with the United States. So all the photos they have of people in Belize will be shared with the United States government.
Question?
Yeah.
If I were to request the algorithm from one of these companies and they gave it to me, would I be seeing mathematical formulas? Would I be seeing English? Would I be seeing
Well, yes, you would.
language?
It's basically statistics, and you would see lots and lots of words and lots of coding. And then, but it's called a black box too. So if you read anything, they will even tell you they're not exactly sure how it works, which sounds like I'm making that up, but I'm not. So it's called a black box in many ways. Like, we don't know exactly what's going on. So what they do know, they don't want to share. It's proprietary. And then how the algorithms make these decisions, they're not exactly sure.
So if I got it, could I read it and it made any sense?
No, it wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't. No, I don't know who it would make sense to. Like a really, really high level computer scientist, maybe? Does anyone know?
Sure is.
I really don't know. Anyway, if you're interested in this, this book is phenomenal, not for the writing, but for the information. So have you read this book? What'd you think of it?
Oh, really depressing.
It is depressing, but instead of being called Careless People, it should just be called Mark Zuckerberg's Influence on the World. And I was talking to a professor at OSU saying this book was amazing. And he said, oh, I opened it. It wasn't very good writing, so I didn't finish it. And I said to him, you need to finish this book. And then a couple weeks later, he emailed me saying, I wish every American citizen was required to read this book because they would then understand geopolitics and what's happening right now. So it's by Mark Zuckerberg's second in command for international relations. So how he dealt with governments and leaders of countries. She was his person. She published this book, And the reason you may not have heard of this book is because Facebook tried to sue her into not publishing the book. She won in that she could publish the book, but she's not allowed to promote it. So the book's published, you can see it, but she can't promote her own book.
Wow.
The book speaks for itself. She is, a questionable narrator. She was the second in command, but it's still quite fascinating. And then the book talks about your future and what is the future of surveillance. She talks a little bit about the Uyghurs in China. So as I said, China is the most surveilled country in the world. And specifically, software is being used to follow Uyghurs who are, being oppressed in China, and where are they going, what, all of these things. So it's really about China. And then the chapter we read at the university was Your Society. And that's really what I talk about with students in the class that I teach at OSU. The class that I teach, we start out with some hands-on about AI, just so that students learn the fundamentals of how it works, creating content, how you could use it in writing. That's how I would use it, maybe to better my writing a little bit. But then we talk about all these things that we've talked about here, and what does that mean for the future of society. And my hope in the class is that one or two students will take what they've learned in the class and maybe become advocates in policy, or maybe apply it in their own jobs. So when I first taught the class, it's an experimental class, basically. It's how the colloquiums work at the university. But I expected it to be a lot of humanities students. That's where I had put most of my efforts, and then I'm a humanities librarian. But the class every time has been majority computer science students. And when I ask them why they're taking the class, they do tell me they just want to hear another perspective from someone outside of computer science. But I'll say too that there is an AI program at OSU, and they're obviously computer scientists, and they're very much, in my experience, the most level-headed about AI. They're not so much into the hype. They know what the tools can do and what they can't do. So my conversations with computer science faculty are quite positive. Let's see. And then if these general topics interest you, these are a couple other books I read that I recommend. This one, if anyone here is an astrophysicist, is written by an astrophysicist. I listened to this in audio, so it was really good in audio, because when he gets deep into the astrophysics, I kind of zone out because I'm not a scientist. So I'm going to say there are parts of this book that I didn't quite understand. But it's a deep dive into what the leaders of tech think about now and the future, and what they've said in interviews about their visions for the future and why they think the way they do. So, for example, if you want to know why Elon Musk has so many children, he details it in here. What they've said and why they're doing this.
So gross.
And then the book I recommend most often, that is actually quite a bit like Codependent, is AI Snake Oil. I always tell people that the title, in my opinion, is unfortunate, because it does make you think it's all a negative book about AI, and it is not. It's kind of a balance, as it says in the subtitle, what artificial intelligence can do, what it can't do, and how to tell the difference. So that's what the book is about: when there are good things, when there are not so good things, and how you can tell what's trying to be sold to you, but what's actually beneficial. So that's my talk. I'm wondering if you have any questions. Yes.
What was the first book? Ghost something?
Ghost Work.
Ghost Work. Okay.
Again, I love that book.
Okay. I wish I'd talked to you before you I'm the person that makes the book list back there, and I could have just.
Oh, yeah, I told Bonnie the day before. I was like, oh, I think I forgot to mention this book. Sorry.
I think we can add it. I'll talk to.
And this book's older, so I want to say that this was before the drop of ChatGPT. So this type of gig work were data labelers. As I said, it's been for Facebook and other online media as well.
We'll add them.
Yeah.
So if you do refuse to have your photo taken at the airport, it's already too late, right?
That is my guess. I can't say for sure, but there are people refusing it. But personally, I don't want to say no. I don't want to have a tuffle with
Could you repeat the question?
I say no.
Can you say, if you say no to having your photo taken at the airport, is it too late? I don't know, but maybe. I'm guessing they already have your photo. Yes.
I also just wonder if it even matters that much at this point, because like, we're being surveilled all the time.
Right.
Walking around, like, because there are cameras everywhere.
Mhm.
So we don't know where all of that data goes necessarily. It could be training other facial recognition databases. We don't know how private that info is. I don't know if I mean, this isn't facial recognition, but like the flock cameras, for example, if you look that up in the news, that's become a real
Yeah.
privacy thing too, because it's just, I mean, these cameras are just they're just scanning everything. That data is going somewhere. Also, the Oregon DMV was hacked really significantly not long ago. So I'm sure that all of the photos were part of that hack.
Yeah, that's where, like the book that I mentioned, How Data Happened, that's what was fascinating to me. I don't think until maybe 5 years ago I realized, oh, wait, it's not just data. We'll go here and then there. Yeah.
Was there any discussion about AI taking jobs?
My students are very concerned about AI taking jobs, and the computer science students specifically were concerned, but that's not a field I have a lot of information about. But that's a concern across the board.
Any sense of what's going to be happening in the new building on campus that's supposed to be?
Oh, the supercomputer?
Yeah, is that related? It is related to AI in some manner, but
Yeah, the supercomputer will have, it'll be unveiled next year, and it's going to be used for research, but I haven't had any connection with that, so I'm not exactly sure the many, many things that it will do. But it was 30 million. I know that.
just for the computer.
Yeah, just for the computer. But the Wongs donated the computer, so. Yeah.
There is a lot of AI research going on right now at OSU, even with the existing equipment. They've got a lot of computers, and they're doing AI. I gave a talk on AI at the Academy for Lifelong Learning. I could talk for an hour about this. One thing people don't seem to recognize, especially journalists, is that AI is, number one, it's not magic, and it's not new.
Right.
The earliest example of AI that I gave when I gave my talk was from the 16th century. The earliest example of generative AI was from 17, and the earliest example of deep fakes that I gave was from 1902.
The train, you might want to wait till the train is finished. No one can hear you.
So he was talking about AI not being new, and that is true. What's different now is, as of the past 5 years, just the vast amounts of data that these computers are able to analyze. We'll wait for the train.
Oh my God.
Okay?
Yeah, go.
Okay, as for jobs, there's one job that has been delisted by the Department of Labor, and that's elevator operator. They were replaced by AI. Basically, the automatic controls on elevators were all artificial intelligence, and when they were first replaced, when they first installed the automatic elevator controls, they kept the manual controls. A lot of commercial buildings kept the manual controls and kept an elevator operator in the elevator, because there were a lot of people who were just frightened to ride an elevator, didn't have a human operator.
Yeah.
That sounds silly today. But today there are people who are afraid to get into a car that's driven by AI. And that's going to sound silly 50 years from now. And as for jobs, John Maynard Keynes, the economist, predicted that by now people would be working 15 hours per week. And he made that prediction in 1930, before there were any computers, any AI, before automation, when most women did not work outside the home, and a decade before the U.S. went down to a 40-hour work week. He said just the way things were going, we should be working 15 hours a week now. Actually, he said we should be working less than 15 hours a week.
I can tell you I'm not working 15 hours.
15 hours a week says we're doing something very wrong, because we could be working 15 hours a week. If half the people at a mall didn't show up for work, you wouldn't notice it. It's amazing how many make-work jobs there are.
Are there any final questions? Thank you.
So
Yeah.
So this has been pretty negative, I guess, about
Well, and I will just say that's the premise of the book, is the concerns about AI.
you personally. Is there anything good we can say about AI, perhaps?
Well, this is why I'm involved in wanting more regulation and policies. If I were living in the EU, I would probably be a more positive person about it than I am, because the EU is really trying to have regulation and community conversations about how they want it to be regulated. So I do think there is a positive future if there is more regulation by governments and people. But right now, with tech being in charge, big tech and lots of money, those are my concerns, that they don't have human interest as the primary driver for what they're doing for positive. So I think people need to, in my opinion, become more aware so that we can push against some of these elements. We'll start in the back.
Do you have any recommendations for how to like better manage your online life to navigate the new AI flooded internet?
Yeah, so I've been reading some about different people's opinions. And of course, some people love it and they want to use it all the time. But for myself, I really stand back and think, and this is what I tell my students too, why am I using this and what am I using it for? So an issue that's coming up in universities and in students is they're using it to write, which I don't technically have a problem with generally. But if you yourself don't know how to write and you're not a good writer and it's just filling in the blanks, that can be, it could erode your ability to write for yourself. So what I tell students is I kind of transparently explain how I use AI when I use it. And I love to write. So I know what I'm like as a writer. I know what I sound like as a writer. So I'll write something and then I might put it into an AI chatbot and say, okay, this is what I've written. What is weak about it, or how could it be improved? And then I get feedback on what I've done rather than having it create from scratch for me. Or I do lesson plans and then I'll upload them and say, in what way is this lesson plan weak? So I use it in those ways. But what I encourage people to do is just think about when you're using it, how you're using it. And then in students, I've noticed a real pushback against art, generative art. The same thing is questioning that. There are lots of people that ask me environmental questions, and I'm just going to say that that's not my well of knowledge. So when there are environmental concerns about using AI in water, I actually don't have all that much information about it. I'm not sure how it compares to like an internet search or other things. Yeah.
How do we find our photos on AI?
How do you, yeah, we can't. Well, this Clearview that's discussed in the book, one of the books, Clearview. So if you wanted, what do you mean find your photos? Like, how is AI using your photos?
Well, which photos are
in there?
Yeah.
There's no way to know because it's considered proprietary information by those companies. So whatever photos they have, they're not telling everyone what data is in there.
Yeah. I would just want to share one thing. I tried AI recently. I don't know how many of you do the New York Times connection puzzle. And I had it create a puzzle and explain its thinking, which was absolutely hilarious. And it was the metacognition just went on and on. Then I thought of this and that. It was so it's almost spooky though. think, and explain its thinking.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind that I do talk about with students a lot is statistical probability. And although it seems like a human, it's definitely statistics. It's just amazing what you can do with statistics when you have all the information written in the world. But you may have read recent news stories of people dying by suicide after having conversations with AI. So this is something that needs to be spread around, is explanations to young adults or adults who believe that it is sentient. So there have been adults as well who have died by suicide, believing that it was sentient, that it was telling them basically giving them horrible advice. And so OpenAI has said that they've put in more guardrails to avoid those types of conversations, but researchers are finding that there's still a problem. So we have 4 minutes. Any last questions? Yeah, Bonnie.
I've been using it quite a bit just to see how it works really and to help teach other people how to use it. And what I found is it's kind of like the most popular answer on the internet is often what its source is. So that's what I think. So I'm like, do I want just the most popular answer that the internet will give me for this question and then work from there? then okay. But otherwise, like
Yeah, I can actually tell you a good tool we have in the library, and that's that there are tools, AI tools coming out for literature research for faculty to use when they're doing their literature reviews. And so we have subscribed to 3 soft platforms, and they only search academic literature. And so in that way, it's limiting what data is being searched and what's being served up, so that professor or students could come and ask a question, and then it will surface the relevant research along with synthesizing what it found into a paragraph.
sort of seeming like AI might be more powerful and more useful in smaller models.
Yes. So there are smaller models, which I'm not an expert on, but I think that's where the medical comes in as well, when just focusing on one, like X-rays or whatnot. Yeah, but ChatGPT, I mean, people will ask me what is ChatGPT for, and when these large language models first came out, there was a talk at Stanford, and I thought it was really well explained, and then he said large language models, which is what fuels AI, they weren't designed to do anything. It was just, here's something, look what it does. Now what do people want to do with it? So it wasn't designed with a specific case in mind. That's why people use it as a best friend versus a math problem versus for writing. So now these smaller tools are coming out, focusing on smaller things. So I think that's all the time we have for today. You can stay after and talk.
Oh, good.
Thanks, James.
The book.
And so, something
Sure, do you mind doing that?
No, not at all.
Yeah,
I can do it. That's
some of
easier
them
if I
might
do it
have
that way.
gotten, some of them might have gotten this, so yeah.
I don't think I see a single one of those.
She said some of them, I may have added some of them, but not all.
I never checked, so I sent it to you.
That's good. Yeah, I would, if you don't mind, that'd be wonderful. Thank you so much.
I don't want to read about the newspaper tomorrow. And especially when you publish them. Well.